Eminem.
Mr. Controversy, Eminem.
Eminem, yes!
Interesting. Eminem.
Eminem!
It's Eminem!
And the winner is Eminem, the Eminem Show.
The life of a rap god. From the streets of Detroit to global superstardom, Marshall Bruce Mathers III, known to the world as Eminem, became more than just a rapper. He became a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of raw talent, relentless drive, and unfiltered truth. But his story was not a straight line. It was a winding path of struggle, survival, and determination that would take him from poverty to becoming one of the most influential artists of his generation. Eminem's music would go on to break boundaries, challenge conventions, and inspire millions. Yet behind the fame, behind the awards, and the millions of records sold was a story of hardship, pain, and the relentless pursuit of a dream. This is the story of Marshall Mathers, the man, the myth, and the legend known as Eminem. Marshall Bruce Mathers III was born on October 17, 1972, in St. Joseph, Missouri, to Deborah Ray Nelson and Marshall Bruce Mathers Jr. His arrival into the world, however, came with instability and uncertainty. His parents' marriage was short-lived, and by the time Marshall was an infant, his father had left, leaving his mother to raise him on her own. The absence of a father figure would leave a lasting mark on his childhood, shaping his perspectives on family, loyalty, and trust. Growing up, Marshall's life was defined by constant upheaval. He and his mother moved frequently, bouncing between neighborhoods in Detroit, Michigan, in search of stability that never seemed to come. Poverty was an unrelenting presence. Food was scarce, housing was often unstable, and opportunities for a normal childhood were limited. The young Marshall faced the harsh realities of life early on, and the sense of being an outsider became a central theme in his formative years. School offered little respite. Marshall was small for his age, quiet, and often targeted by bullies who recognized him as vulnerable. He struggled to make friends and fit in, experiencing the isolation and alienation that would later fuel the anger and raw emotion in his music. Despite these challenges, he discovered a refuge in words. Writing became his escape, a way to articulate his feelings and make sense of a world that often seemed hostile. By the age of 11, Marshall had begun to experiment with rap. He would write rhymes and practice delivery in front of mirrors, pretending to be other artists and imagining himself on stage. Hip-hop became his lifeline, a medium where he could channel his frustrations, his creativity, and his ambition. Detroit's vibrant hip-hop scene exposed him to underground artists and local battles, and the young Marshall soaked it all in, learning the rules of the game, the rhythm of the streets, and the power of lyrical expression. Marshall's childhood was also marked by a complicated relationship with his mother. Debbie Mathers, a fiercely protective woman, struggled with her own challenges, which often put additional pressure on Marshall. Their relationship would oscillate between love, dependence, and conflict, planting seeds for some of the lyrical narratives that would later define Eminem's career. Despite these tensions, his mother was a constant presence, supporting his early interest in music and writing whenever possible. Even as a preteen, Marshall developed a deep awareness of his environment. Detroit in the 1970s and 1980s was a city grappling with economic decline, social unrest, and the aftermath of deindustrialization. Poverty, crime, and racial tensions were realities of everyday life. For a young white boy in predominantly black neighborhoods, this environment presented challenges and opportunities alike. He was often an outsider, but he learned quickly how to navigate this complex social landscape. By his early teens, Marshall had begun to channel his anger and frustration into performance. He participated in rap battles, open mic events, and any local venue that would let him perform. Each performance was a test, a proving ground, and a chance to assert himself. He discovered that words could be a weapon, a shield, and a bridge to a world beyond his immediate struggles. This realization would become foundational to the identity of Eminem and the creation of his alter ego, Slim Shady. By 1987, at the age of 14, Marshall's life had been shaped by adversity, survival, and a fierce drive to express himself. The instability of his home, the bullying, the poverty, and the sense of isolation had forged a young man with resilience and determination. It was during these years that he would begin to imagine a future far beyond Detroit, a future where his voice, his words, and his talent could break through every barrier. The seeds of Slim Shady, the persona that would shock the world, were planted during these formative years. And though life was far from easy, Marshall Mathers was beginning a journey that would transform him into one of the most influential artists of his generation. By the late 1980s, Marshall Mathers was a teenager navigating the tough streets of Detroit, a city teetering between economic decline and cultural vibrancy. School remained a challenge. He continued to face bullying, academic struggles, and frequent moves. But the world of music offered a refuge. Rap was no longer just an interest. It had become a lifeline, a way to assert control over his chaotic surroundings. Marshall threw himself into hip-hop culture, studying the techniques of the artists he admired. He listened to legends like Rakim, LL Cool J, and NWA, dissecting their flows, understanding their wordplay, and absorbing the raw storytelling that made their music resonate. Detroit's underground scene became his training ground. Local battles, talent shows, and open mic nights gave him opportunities to test his skills, and he began developing a reputation for ferocity and lyrical precision. It was during this period that Marshall faced one of his most formative challenges, being a white rapper in a predominantly black art form. The skepticism he encountered could have crushed his ambition, but instead, it fueled it. He learned that to succeed, he would have to be not just talented, but extraordinary. Every rhyme, every verse, every punchline had to be sharper, faster, and more inventive than the competition. This pressure forged a level of discipline and resilience that would define his career. By the early 1990s, Marshall's personal life was as tumultuous as his artistic one. His relationship with his mother was strained, often marked by conflict and accusations, and his home life remained unstable. He dropped out of high school multiple times, struggling to maintain a sense of normalcy amid the chaos. Yet his commitment to rap never wavered. In fact, these personal struggles became fuel for his creativity, giving him material that was as raw and authentic as anything in the underground scene. It was also during these years that Marshall began to develop the persona that would become his alter ego, Slim Shady. Slim Shady was angry, irreverent, and unfiltered, a stark contrast to the quieter, more introspective Marshall. Through Slim Shady, he could explore violence, dark humor, and societal critique without restraint. This alter ego became a powerful outlet, allowing him to articulate frustrations that might have otherwise remained bottled up, and it would later become the vehicle that launched his career. Marshall began recording demos in makeshift studios, sometimes in basements or borrowed spaces, using whatever equipment he could find. These early recordings were raw, imperfect, and aggressive, but they captured a voice that was entirely new and unforgettable. He hustled tirelessly, handing out tapes, performing wherever he could, and relentlessly pursuing recognition. Every rejection was met with renewed determination. Every insult became fuel, and every minor victory was celebrated as progress towards something larger. During this period, he also engaged in countless rap battles, the proving grounds of Detroit's underground hip-hop scene. These battles were brutal tests of skill, wit, and endurance. Marshall's ability to craft clever, biting, and often shocking verses earned him respect among his peers. He honed his ability to think quickly, respond creatively under pressure, and command attention, skills that would later define his stage presence and recording style. In 1996, he released the independent EP, Slim Shady EP, a project that captured the essence of his alter ego, provocative, darkly humorous, and brutally honest. The EP circulated in Detroit's underground scene and eventually caught the attention of Dr. Dre, a legendary producer who recognized the unique talent and vision behind the raw sound. Dr. Dre saw potential in Marshall that few others could, a combination of lyrical genius, raw emotion, and the ability to connect with audiences in a way that transcended race, background, and expectation. Meeting Dr. Dre was a pivotal moment in Marshall's life. It marked the bridge between local recognition and global stardom. Dre immediately saw that this young rapper from Detroit, with a troubled past and an unyielding drive, had the potential to change the face of hip-hop forever. The signing with Aftermath Entertainment would launch Eminem into the mainstream, but before that could happen, Marshall had to perfect his voice, sharpen his pen, and embrace the darkness and humor of Slim Shady fully. By 1997, Marshall Mathers had transformed from a struggling teen into a determined artist with a mission. He had faced poverty, bullying, and personal chaos, but he had also built skills, resilience, and a unique artistic identity. Slim Shady was no longer just a persona. It was a symbol of defiance, creativity, and unfiltered expression. And while the world had yet to hear him, the foundation for one of the most extraordinary careers in music history had already been laid. In 1997, Marshall Mathers' life changed forever. After years of hustling in Detroit's underground rap scene, handing out demos, and enduring rejection after rejection, his music finally reached the ears of Dr. Dre, the legendary producer who had shaped the sound of hip-hop with NWA and launched the careers of icons like Snoop Dogg, heard something in Marshall's Slim Shady EP that no one else had fully recognized. Beneath the shock value and dark humor was a raw, undeniable genius. The two met, and despite skepticism from some of Dre's peers, their chemistry was immediate. Dre later admitted that within the first few minutes of working together, he knew Marshall was something extraordinary. Eminem, as the world would come to know him, had finally found the platform he needed. In 1999, the Slim Shady LP was released under Aftermath Entertainment. From the very first track, it was clear this was no ordinary rap album. The Slim Shady persona leapt off the record, dark, violent, satirical, and brutally honest. Songs like My Name Is introduced the world to Eminem's twisted sense of humor, blending outrageous punchlines with razor-sharp lyricism. The single was both hilarious and shocking, and it instantly made him one of the most talked-about new artists in music. But the album wasn't all jokes. Beneath the humor, tracks like Rock Bottom revealed the pain of poverty and despair that Marshall had endured. The contrast between humor and raw vulnerability became one of Eminem's defining trademarks. He wasn't just rapping to entertain, he was rapping to survive, to express truths too raw for ordinary conversation. The world had never seen anything quite like him. Critics were divided. Some praised his creativity, his technical mastery, and his audacity. Others condemned him, calling his lyrics violent, misogynistic, and offensive. But whether you loved him or hated him, one thing was certain: you couldn't ignore him. The Slim Shady LP was a commercial success, selling millions of copies worldwide and earning Eminem his first Grammy Award for Best Rap Album. His acceptance speech was as controversial as his music, sparking debates about censorship, free speech, and the role of art in society. Yet for Marshall, the award was more than recognition. It was validation, a moment that proved all the years of struggle, rejection, and ridicule had been worth it. Fame, however, came with its own challenges. Almost overnight, Marshall went from a struggling rapper in Detroit to one of the most famous and infamous figures in music. Paparazzi followed him, journalists dissected his lyrics, politicians condemned him, parents groups launched campaigns against him, calling his music dangerous. But instead of backing down, Eminem embraced the controversy. He understood that Slim Shady was more than a persona. It was a lightning rod, a mirror held up to society's hypocrisies and fears. Eminem himself once described Slim Shady as a release valve, a way to vent the darkest thoughts he couldn't otherwise express. For his fans, Slim Shady was cathartic. He said the things they were too afraid to say, voiced the frustrations they carried silently, and embodied the anger of a generation that felt overlooked. In this way, Eminem was more than a rapper. He became a cultural phenomenon. The Slim Shady LP also showcased Eminem's technical brilliance. His flow was complex, his rhyme schemes intricate, and his wordplay unmatched. He could shift from comedy to tragedy in a single verse, leaving listeners laughing one moment and stunned into silence the next. For aspiring rappers, he raised the bar. For critics, he forced a reckoning. And for the industry, he became an undeniable force. By the end of 1999, Eminem was no longer just a rising star. He was a household name, a lightning rod for controversy, and a voice that demanded attention. The Slim Shady LP had done more than put him on the map. It had redrawn the boundaries of hip-hop itself. And while the success was enormous, this was only the beginning. Marshall Mathers, the kid from Detroit who once dreamed of being heard, was about to release an album that would change music forever. In May of 2000, Eminem released what would become one of the most explosive albums in music history, the Marshall Mathers LP. If the Slim Shady LP had introduced him to the world, this album cemented his place as a cultural juggernaut. It was raw, unapologetic, and brutally honest, a portrait of Marshall Mathers at the height of both creativity and chaos. From the opening track, Kill You, it was clear Eminem wasn't backing down from controversy. The lyrics were violent, graphic, and confrontational, sparking immediate backlash. But beneath the shock value lay technical brilliance. His rhymes weaved intricate patterns, his flows shifted effortlessly, and his storytelling cut deeper than ever before. This wasn't just an album, it was a statement. One of the most iconic tracks is Stan, showcased Eminem's ability to blend narrative storytelling with raw emotion. The haunting tale of an obsessed fan, told through letters to Eminem himself, struck a chord with listeners worldwide. It revealed a side of Eminem often hidden behind Slim Shady's mask: vulnerability, self-awareness, and the weight of fame. To this day, Stan remains one of the most studied and influential songs in hip-hop history, even adding a new word to the dictionary to describe obsessive fandom. Other tracks like The Way I Am gave voice to Eminem's frustration with fame and the media. He lashed out at journalists, critics, and even fans who pressured him to live up to impossible expectations. His anger was palpable, but so was his honesty. Millions of listeners related to the sense of being misunderstood, of being pushed into roles they never asked for. And then there was The Real Slim Shady, a song that became an anthem. With its playful beat, catchy hook, and razor-sharp satire, it dominated radio and MTV, making Slim Shady a household name. The track mocked celebrities, skewered pop culture, and proved that Eminem could be both deadly serious and hilariously entertaining within the same breath. The impact of the Marshall Mathers LP was immediate and staggering. It sold 1.76 million copies in its first week alone, breaking records and shocking an industry that had underestimated a rapper from Detroit. By year's end, it had sold millions more, becoming one of the best-selling rap albums of all time. But with success came an avalanche of controversy. Politicians condemned him. Advocacy groups accused him of glorifying violence, misogyny, and homophobia. The media labeled him dangerous. Protesters gathered outside his shows, demanding censorship. Yet for every critic, there were thousands of fans who connected deeply with his music. To them, Eminem wasn't just offensive, he was authentic. He gave a voice to pain, anger, and frustration they felt but couldn't articulate. Even within hip-hop, Eminem was making waves. He was a white rapper who had broken into a predominantly black genre and not only earned respect, but dominated the charts. Some questioned whether he belonged, while others celebrated his undeniable skill. Eminem himself often addressed this tension directly, acknowledging the privilege his skin color afforded him while refusing to downplay the relentless work it took to get where he was. The year 2000 also brought Eminem's personal life into the spotlight. His marriage to Kim Scott was turbulent, often making headlines for its public fights and reconciliations. Their relationship was reflected in songs like Kim, a brutally graphic track that blurred the line between art and reality. Critics were horrified, but fans recognized it as another example of Eminem's willingness to expose his most painful truths through music. By 2001, Eminem was no longer just a rap star, he was a global phenomenon. He performed at the Grammys, won multiple awards, and continued to dominate the charts. His face was on magazine covers, his name in headlines, his lyrics debated in classrooms and Congress alike. Love him or hate him, everyone had an opinion about Eminem. The Marshall Mathers LP didn't just elevate Eminem's career, it reshaped the landscape of hip-hop. It proved that rap could be both commercially successful and artistically daring. It showed that one man's personal struggles, when expressed with honesty and skill, could resonate across cultures, generations, and continents. For Eminem, the kid from Detroit who once dreamed of being heard, global stardom had become a reality. But with fame came pressure, and with pressure came even greater challenges. The world was waiting to see what he would do next. And in 2002, Eminem would silence any doubts with an album that took his storytelling, his artistry, and his fame to an entirely new level. By 2002, Eminem wasn't just one of the biggest names in music, he was one of the most talked about figures in the entire world. With the Marshall Mathers LP behind him, he had achieved global stardom, but now came the question, could he sustain it? The answer would come in the form of a new album, a leap into Hollywood, and one of the most defining chapters of his career. In May 2002, Eminem released The Eminem Show, his fourth studio album. From the opening track, it was clear this wasn't simply a continuation of Slim Shady's antics or Marshall's rage. This album was more reflective, more personal, and yet just as hard-hitting. It addressed fame, politics, fatherhood, and the struggles of being under constant scrutiny. Songs like Cleaning Out My Closet pulled back the curtain on Eminem's personal life, exposing his fractured relationship with his mother in brutal honesty. It was a song of anger, but also of vulnerability. A young man confronting the pain of his childhood for the whole world to hear. Millions of listeners connected with the raw emotion, even if the subject matter was deeply uncomfortable. Then came Without Me, the album's breakout single. Playful, mischievous, and laced with satire, it proved Slim Shady was still alive and well. The music video, with its comic book energy, dominated MTV, and the song became an anthem across the globe. It was Eminem at his most entertaining, mocking celebrities, ridiculing politicians, and reminding the world that he wasn't going anywhere. But the Eminem show wasn't all humor. Tracks like Sing for the Moment, which sampled Aerosmith's Dream On, reflected on the power of music itself, the way lyrics could inspire, provoke, and even save lives. Eminem recognized the weight of his influence, acknowledging both the responsibility and the danger of his platform. And in white America, he directly confronted the political and social firestorm surrounding his career, questioning censorship, race, and the fear he instilled in mainstream culture. The album was a massive success, selling over 1 million copies in its first week, and ultimately becoming one of the best-selling albums of the decade. Critics praised its maturity, its depth, and its boldness. Eminem had proven that he wasn't just a flash of controversy, he was a true artist, capable of blending entertainment with introspection in a way few had achieved before. But 2002 would bring more than just music. That same year, Eminem made the leap to Hollywood with the release of 8 Mile, a semi-autobiographical film that told the story of a struggling rapper from Detroit trying to break through. Eminem played the lead role of Jimmy Smith Jr., a character loosely based on himself, and his performance stunned both fans and critics. For someone with no prior acting experience, he delivered a raw, believable, and deeply human portrayal of a young man fighting against impossible odds. 8 Mile was more than just a movie. It was a cultural moment. It introduced millions of new fans to Eminem's story, showing the world the reality behind the lyrics, the battles, the poverty, the pain, and the drive that had shaped him. The film's climax, featuring Eminem's unforgettable freestyle battle scenes, became instantly iconic. For many, it was the first time they had seen battle rap on the big screen, and Eminem's delivery made it unforgettable. And then there was Lose Yourself, the lead single from the film's soundtrack, a song that captured the essence of seizing opportunity, of never letting a single moment slip away. With its driving beat and motivational lyrics, it became one of Eminem's greatest achievements. Lose Yourself not only topped charts around the world, but it also earned him an Academy Award for Best Original Song, the first time a hip-hop track had ever received the honor. Eminem, the kid from Detroit who once dreamed of being heard, now held an Oscar in his hands. By 2003, Eminem was at the peak of his powers. He was selling millions of records, starring in movies, winning awards across every major stage, and commanding headlines everywhere he went. But with success came pressure. Fame had magnified every detail of his life: his turbulent marriage, his relationship with his daughter Haley, his feuds with other celebrities, and his ongoing battles with addiction. He masked the chaos with music and humor, but behind the scenes, the weight of it all was beginning to take a toll. In 2004, Eminem released Encore, an album that was both highly anticipated and deeply polarizing. While it contained hits like Just Lose It and Mockingbird, many fans and critics felt it lacked the sharpness and intensity of his earlier work. Some even saw it as a sign that Eminem was beginning to struggle creatively. What no one fully realized at the time, however, was that Eminem's battles weren't just with fame or critics, they were with himself. The years from 2002 to 2004 marked Eminem's rise not just as a rapper, but as a global icon. He had conquered music, broken into Hollywood, and rewritten the rules of hip-hop's place in mainstream culture. Yet beneath the awards, the accolades, and the headlines, storm clouds were forming. Fame had given him everything he once dreamed of, but it had also brought demons he could no longer ignore. The next chapter of Eminem's life would not be defined by awards or chart-topping hits, but by survival. Because as the world celebrated his success, Eminem was heading toward the darkest battle of his life. By 2005, Eminem was living a life that millions envied: fame, fortune, awards, and influence. But behind the spotlight, Marshall Mathers was unraveling. The years of pressure, constant media scrutiny, and personal turmoil were catching up to him. At the height of his success, Eminem began facing the darkest chapter of his life: his battle with addiction. Painkillers had crept into his routine quietly at first, prescribed for sleep, for stress, for the toll of touring. But soon they became a crutch. Vicodin, Valium, Ambien What started as a way to cope spiraled into dependence. Eminem himself would later admit that he was taking handfuls of pills daily, often not even knowing what he was swallowing. His once laser-focused mind became clouded, his sharpness dulled. The same artist who could once write a song in a single sitting now struggled to function at all. The decline was visible. His weight fluctuated. His performances lost their energy. And while his music still sold, the passion that once fueled him seemed to fade. In 2005, he released a greatest hits compilation, Curtain Call, The Hits. To fans, it felt like a celebration. To Eminem, it was a farewell of sorts, a quiet signal that he was stepping away. Rumors swirled about retirement, about whether Slim Shady had run his course. But the truth was far more personal. Marshall Mathers was fighting to survive. That same year, tragedy struck when his close friend and fellow D12 member, Proof, was killed in a nightclub shooting. Proof had been more than just a bandmate. He was Eminem's mentor, his brother, his guiding force in Detroit's underground rap scene. His death devastated Eminem, shattering one of the few stable pillars in his chaotic life. Losing Proof plunged him deeper into isolation, grief, and substance abuse. The man who had once stood on top of the world now found himself unable to stand at all. Eminem disappeared from the spotlight. Public appearances grew rare. Interviews stopped. Paparazzi photos revealed a man who looked tired, bloated, and lost. The tabloids speculated endlessly. Was he finished? Was he in rehab? Had he given up? For fans, the silence was deafening. For Eminem, it was survival mode. His addiction was now life-threatening. In 2007, that threat became terrifyingly real. After years of escalating pill use, Eminem overdosed on methadone. His organs were shutting down. Doctors told him he was just hours away from dying. For Marshall, it was a wake-up call, but even then, recovery was not immediate. Addiction had its claws deep, and climbing out would take years of struggle, relapse, and resilience. During this period, Eminem often turned inward, reflecting on his childhood, his fame, and the chaos that had consumed him. He realized he had nearly left his daughter Haley without a father, repeating the very cycle of absence and pain that had haunted his own childhood. That realization, combined with the loss of Proof, became a spark. It wasn't instant, but it was the beginning of a fight back. By 2008, Eminem had checked himself into rehab multiple times. He began running, working out, and seeking healthier outlets for his pain. Slowly, the fog lifted. Slowly, Marshall Mathers, the man, not just the rapper, started to reemerge. But while he fought for his life privately, fans wondered if they would ever hear from him again. Was Eminem finished? Was Slim Shady gone forever? The world didn't know it yet, but Eminem was preparing for one of the greatest comebacks in music history. From the edge of death, from the depths of addiction, he was about to rise again, sharper, hungrier, and more focused than ever before. By 2009, Eminem had been absent from the spotlight for years. Fans wondered if he would ever return or if his legacy had already been sealed. But what no one expected was that Marshall Mathers was not only coming back, he was about to prove that even after hitting rock bottom, he could rise stronger than ever. His first step back into the public eye came with the release of Relapse in May 2009. It was his first studio album in nearly 5 years, and it marked a return to the Slim Shady persona. Dark, twisted, and shocking. Songs like 3 a.m. and My Mom leaned heavily into horrorcore themes, drenched in gruesome imagery and outrageous wordplay. For some fans, it was a welcome return to the unfiltered madness of Shady. For others, it felt like Eminem was still finding his footing after years of silence. Relapse was met with mixed reviews, but what stood out was his technical skill. Despite his struggles, Eminem's flow was sharper than ever, his rhyme schemes more complex, and his delivery relentless. He even addressed his addiction directly in songs like Deja Vu, offering brutally honest accounts of overdosing, of hiding pills, of spiraling out of control. It was uncomfortable, but it was real. For Eminem, Relapse wasn't just an album. It was therapy, a way of confronting demons he had nearly died from. That same year, the world saw glimpses of the old Slim Shady in playful tracks like We Made You, reminding fans that Eminem hadn't lost his sense of humor. Yet even as he promoted Relapse, Eminem admitted privately that he wasn't satisfied. He later revealed that he had recorded a second installment, Relapse 2, but scrapped it after realizing he could do better. He wasn't just trying to rap again, he was rebuilding himself. The true comeback arrived in 2010 with Recovery. Unlike Relapse, Recovery stripped away much of Slim Shady's cartoonish violence and instead focused on Marshall's real struggles, addiction, loss, and the difficult road back to sobriety. It was raw, vulnerable, and deeply inspiring. Songs like Not Afraid became anthems of resilience, declaring his determination to face his fears, rebuild his life, and stand tall after years in the shadows. Then came Love the Way You Lie, featuring Rihanna. The track, which explored the cycle of a toxic relationship, became one of Eminem's biggest hits ever. Its emotional weight, paired with Rihanna's haunting chorus, resonated with millions worldwide. The song topped charts in more than 20 countries, proving that Eminem wasn't just back, he was bigger than ever. Recovery earned Eminem 2 Grammy Awards, including Best Rap Album, and went on to become one of the best-selling albums of 2010. Critics praised it as one of his most mature and heartfelt works, a far cry from the shock-driven antics of Slim Shady. For fans, it was proof that Marshall Mathers had survived and was thriving again. By 2011, Eminem had re-established himself at the top of the rap world. He teamed up with fellow Detroit rapper Royce da 5'9" to release the album Hell the Sequel under the duo name Bad Meets Evil. The project was a lyrical showcase, 2 master wordsmiths trading verses with precision and speed. Songs like Fast Lane reminded everyone that Eminem's technical skills were still unmatched. In 2013, Eminem pushed further with the release of the Marshall Mathers LP 2, a sequel to his 2000 masterpiece. The expectations were enormous. How could he possibly follow up one of the most iconic rap albums ever? But Eminem delivered. The album featured tracks like Rap God, where he unleashed a lightning-fast verse that stunned fans and critics alike, cementing his reputation as one of the greatest technical rappers of all time. The album also included The Monster, another collaboration with Rihanna, which topped the charts and won a Grammy. Through these songs, Eminem balanced nostalgia for his past with a clear embrace of his present. He wasn't the same man he was in 2000, and he didn't need to be. This was Eminem sober, focused, and at peace with his evolution. From 2009 to 2013, Eminem went from nearly losing his life to reclaiming his throne. He confronted addiction, mourned the loss of his closest friend, and rebuilt himself as both an artist and a man. His story of redemption wasn't just about music, it was about survival. For millions of fans around the world, Recovery wasn't just the title of an album, it was a message, a promise, and a testament to the power of resilience. By 2014, Eminem had already achieved what most artists could only dream of. He had sold millions of albums, won Grammys, even an Oscar. He had battled addiction and come back stronger. But the question lingered, how would he continue to evolve in a rapidly changing music landscape? Hip-hop itself had transformed since his debut. New artists, new sounds, and new audiences dominated the charts. Yet once again, Marshall Mathers would prove that he could adapt, compete, and remain relevant. In November 2014, Eminem released Shady 15, a compilation album celebrating 15 years of his label, Shady Records. The project featured classic hits alongside new material from Eminem and his roster of artists, including Slaughterhouse and Yelawolf. It was part nostalgia, part showcase of Shady's continued influence in hip-hop. And while not a traditional studio album, it reminded fans that Eminem's pen was still sharp, his presence still commanding. That same year, he delivered one of his most celebrated guest verses on the track, Detroit Versus, Everybody alongside fellow Motor City rappers. The song was a declaration of pride, a reminder of where Eminem came from, and a reaffirmation of his bond with Detroit. Even after global fame, he never forgot the city that shaped him. 3 years later, in 2017, Eminem shocked fans with the surprise release of Revival. The album was his most politically charged work to date, addressing issues like racism, social justice, and his outspoken criticism of then-President Donald Trump. Songs like Untouchable and Like Home revealed a side of Eminem that was more reflective and socially conscious. Yet the album received mixed reviews. Some praised his willingness to tackle heavy themes, while others felt the production and songwriting didn't match his earlier brilliance. But if Revival left fans divided, Eminem wasn't finished. In August 2018, he dropped another surprise album, Kamikaze. This time, the reception was explosive. Kamikaze was sharp, angry, and unapologetic, a direct response to critics who had dismissed Revival. On tracks like The Ringer and Fall, Eminem took aim at the media, at younger rappers, and at anyone who doubted his relevance. The album felt like vintage Eminem, aggressive, technical, and hungry. Fans celebrated it as one of his best projects in years. Kamikaze also produced the hit Lucky You, featuring Joyner Lucas, where Eminem delivered rapid-fire verses that showcased his unmatched technical skill. And in Kill Shot, a diss track aimed at rapper Machine Gun Kelly, Eminem reminded the world of his battle rap roots. The song broke records, becoming one of the most streamed hip-hop tracks in history within its first 24 hours. It was proof that 2 decades into his career, Eminem could still dominate the conversation. Then, in January 2020, Eminem once again surprised fans with the release of Music to Be Murdered By, an album inspired by Alfred Hitchcock. It was experimental, blending horror themes with contemporary production, and featured collaborations with artists like Juice WRLD, Ed Sheeran, and Anderson .Paak. The album included Godzilla, where Eminem delivered one of his fastest verses ever recorded, rapping 224 words in just 31 seconds. Even after all these years, he continued to push the limits of what was possible with language and rhythm. Music to Be Murdered By was followed later that same year by a deluxe edition, expanding the project with new tracks that further cemented Eminem's relevance. Critics and fans alike praised his ability to evolve while staying true to his roots. At a time when many of his peers had faded from the spotlight, Eminem remained a headline maker, a record breaker, and a lightning rod for debate. Beyond music, Eminem also embraced his role as a cultural elder statesman. He mentored younger artists, invested in Detroit's music scene, and continued to expand Shady Records' influence. He gave back to his community through the Marshall Mathers Foundation, supporting at-risk youth and underprivileged families. For someone who had grown up in poverty, giving back was more than charity, it was personal. By 2020, Eminem had secured his place as one of the most influential and successful rappers in history. He had weathered controversy, personal tragedy, and the ever-changing tides of the music industry. He wasn't just a survivor, he was a legend. And yet, through it all, he remained Marshall Mathers, the kid from Detroit who had turned pain into poetry, struggle into art, and anger into anthems. By the start of the 2020s, Eminem had already lived several lifetimes in one. He had gone from poverty in Detroit to becoming one of the best-selling artists in history. He had battled addiction, endured controversy, and staged one of the greatest comebacks the music world had ever seen. Yet even after 3 decades in the spotlight, Marshall Mathers continued to evolve. In 2021, Eminem kept a relatively low profile musically, but his legacy was everywhere. His lyrics were studied in classrooms. His songs continued to rack up streams by the billions, and his influence could be heard in a new generation of rappers who cited him as inspiration, from lyrical technicians like Joyner Lucas to mainstream hitmakers who grew up memorizing his verses. That same year, Eminem expanded his impact outside of music. He opened Mom's Spaghetti, a Detroit restaurant inspired by his famous lyric from Lose Yourself. Fans lined up for hours to taste the food and experience a piece of Eminem's world. It was more than a business venture. It was a symbol of his deep connection to his hometown, the city that had shaped him and remained central to his story. In 2022, Eminem received one of the highest honors in music, induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Standing alongside icons like Dr. Dre, who inducted him, Eminem reflected on his journey with humility and gratitude. He thanked the pioneers of hip-hop who had come before him, acknowledging that without them, his career would never have been possible. It was a moment of recognition, not just for Eminem, but for hip-hop itself. Proof that the genre, once dismissed as a fad, had cemented its place in history. That same year, Eminem joined Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Kendrick Lamar, 50 Cent, and Mary J. Blige for the Super Bowl 56 halftime show. Watched by more than 100 million people, the performance was a celebration of hip-hop's dominance in mainstream culture. Eminem's rendition of Lose Yourself electrified the stadium, reminding the world why his music remained timeless. In a subtle but powerful moment, he even took a knee on stage, an act of solidarity with movements for racial justice, sparking headlines and conversation worldwide. Beyond the stage, Eminem continued mentoring new artists, supporting Detroit's music scene, and working quietly on new material. While he no longer released albums with the same frequency as in his early days, every verse, every feature, and every appearance carried weight. For fans, Eminem didn't need to dominate charts anymore. His presence itself was enough. By 2023 and 2024, Eminem's legacy was undeniable. He had sold over 220 million records worldwide, won 15 Grammy Awards, and remained one of the most influential figures in hip-hop. His story had become one of perseverance and redemption, proof that even the most difficult beginnings could lead to greatness. He had inspired countless artists, given voice to millions of fans, and changed the face of music forever. And yet, at his core, Marshall Mathers remained the same man who once scribbled rhymes in a notebook in a Detroit trailer. He never stopped being a student of the game, never stopped pushing himself to write sharper, faster, and smarter. Whether rapping at lightning speed on Godzilla or delivering heartfelt tributes to his daughter in songs like Mockingbird, his work remained deeply human. Beneath the fame, the controversy, and the accolades, Eminem's greatest gift was his ability to connect. Today, Eminem is more than just an artist. He is a symbol of resilience, of survival, of transformation. His music tells the story of a man who refused to give up, who faced his demons and lived to tell the tale. From a troubled childhood to global superstardom, from addiction to recovery, from underground battles in Detroit to the biggest stages in the world, Eminem's journey is one of the most extraordinary in modern music. And as the world looks ahead, one thing is certain: Eminem's legacy will endure. His words will continue to echo through headphones, classrooms, and stadiums. His story will continue to inspire those who feel broken, overlooked, or underestimated. Because Eminem proved more than anyone that with talent, determination, and relentless honesty, you can rise from nothing and become unforgettable.